Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow.
Oh, a classic.
Right. It's one of those books that, when you finish it, you really feel like you learn something about yourself.
It really changes how you see the world, yeah.
Yeah, and how you think about things. And so we're going to try to, distill some of the, key insights from the book for you all today, and kind of share some of the big ideas and see if we can't all learn a thing or two in the process.
Sounds good.
All right, so Kahneman kicks things off by talking about these two systems of thinking.
Yeah, System 1 and System 2.
Can you, tell us a little bit more about those systems?
Sure. So System 1 is the fast, intuitive, automatic system. It's kind of what we think of as our gut feeling.
It's what lets you catch a ball
Exactly.
without having to, do calculus in your head.
Right.
Or recognize a friend's face without really even thinking about it.
Yeah, exactly. It's very effortless, and it's always running in the background.
So it's like our autopilot.
Yeah, pretty much.
Interesting. And so then what about System 2?
So System 2 is the slower, more deliberate analytical system.
Yeah, okay.
This is the one that we use when we're, solving a tough problem, or we're trying to make a decision where we need to weigh the pros and cons.
You're about to have for dinner?
Sure. Or, maybe something a little more consequential than that. But, it's the part of us that takes effort. And we're not always great at putting in that effort.
Yeah, we like to be lazy.
Right.
Well, especially me.
Especially me.
Yeah. So these two systems are kind of working together all the time in our brains.
They are, yeah.
Do they ever conflict with each other?
Oh, all the time.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens then? What happens when our System 1 is telling us to do one thing and our System 2 is telling us to do something else?
Well, oftentimes System 1 is going to win out.
Because it's faster.
It's faster, it's easier, and, we tend to go with the path of least resistance.
Right.
But, that can sometimes lead us into trouble.
No.
Because System 1 is, as we said, it's very quick, it's very efficient, but it's also prone to making errors. And those errors are what we call cognitive biases.
Oh.
So these are mental shortcuts that our brains use to simplify the world.
They're like little rules of thumb that we use to make decisions.
Exactly, yeah. And they can be very helpful in a lot of situations, but they can also lead us astray.
Interesting. Can you give us an example of, one of these cognitive biases?
Sure. So one of the most well-known cognitive biases is called the availability heuristic.
Availability heuristic.
Yeah. So this is the tendency to overestimate the likelihood of events that are easy to recall. So, for example, if you've recently seen a news report about a plane crash, you might be more likely to overestimate the likelihood of being in a plane crash yourself.
Even though statistically flying is actually very safe.
Right, but because that event is so vivid and memorable.
It's available.
Exactly, it's available. It's going to have a disproportionate impact on your judgment.
I see.
So that's one example of a cognitive bias. There are many others.
What's another one that we should be aware of?
Another common one is called anchoring bias.
Anchoring.
Yeah. So this is the tendency to rely too heavily on the first piece of information that we receive, even if that information is irrelevant.
Okay.
So, for example, if you're negotiating the price of a car,
Yeah.
and the salesperson starts by throwing out a really high number,
Right.
you're likely to be anchored to that number.
Oh.
Even if you know that it's way too high.
So I'll end up paying more than I should.
Potentially, yes, because that first number is going to influence your perception of what's a fair price.
This is all starting to make sense now.
Yeah.
Like all these marketing tricks that I see.
Right.
They're using these biases against me.
Absolutely. They're very aware of these biases, and they use them to their advantage.
Wow. Sneaky.
Yeah, very sneaky.
So knowing about these, System 1 and System 2 and these biases like the availability heuristic and anchoring bias, how can we use this knowledge to make smarter decisions in our everyday lives?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I think the first step is just being aware of these biases,
Okay.
knowing that they exist, knowing that we're all susceptible to them.
Right.
That's a big first step.
So it's like having, like a superpower.
Yeah.
Like I can see these traps coming now
Exactly.
that marketers are setting for me.
Exactly. You're more aware of the mental machinery that's going on behind the scenes.
Okay, so awareness is a good first step.
Right.
What else can we do?
Well, one of the most powerful things you can do is simply slow down.
Slow down.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
Don't let System 1 run the show all the time.
Okay.
Give yourself time to think things through. Consider different perspectives. And really ask yourself, am I letting my emotions or my biases color my judgment? Take a moment to step back from the situation and look at it with a more critical eye.
Okay. Yeah, I think I can do that.
Good.
So slowing down, being more deliberate.
Right.
What else?
Another strategy is reframing the problem.
Reframing.
Yeah. So can you think about how you can present the information differently?
Okay.
Sometimes just changing the way that you're looking at a problem can help you to break free of those biases.
Oh, okay.
Especially things like the anchoring bias or framing effects. Just seeing the information in a different light can really help.
So if I'm like stuck in a rut,
Yeah.
I need to shake things up a bit
Exactly.
and look at it from a different angle.
Right. And don't be afraid to seek out outside views as well.
Okay.
Sometimes we're so close to a problem that we can't see the forest for the trees.
Right. We need that fresh perspective.
Yeah, exactly. Someone who's less invested in the situation can often help you to spot your blind spots and see things more objectively.
Yeah, that's
It's like that saying, you can't read the label when you're inside the jar.
Right.
Sometimes you need to step outside of yourself to really see what's going on.
Okay, so slowing down, reframing, getting outside views.
Yeah.
These are all great strategies,
Yeah.
but let's be honest, even if we, know about these biases and we try these strategies, we're still human.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to make mistakes.
We're not aiming for perfection here.
Right.
It's more about having a better understanding of how our minds work. And with that understanding we can make more deliberate and informed choices. We're not always going to get it right, but at least we'll be going into it with our eyes open.
Right.
So that's really the goal.
Okay, so now that we've seen how these thinking systems can lead us astray. I want to talk about one area where this gets really interesting.
Right.
And that's expert intuition.
Oh, yeah.
So it sounds like kind of a paradox, right?
It does, yeah.
Because if we're all so prone to these errors in judgment, how can we ever trust, anyone's intuition, even an expert's?
Right. So Kahneman dives into this in the book, and he distinguishes between two types of situations where intuition comes into play.
Okay.
The first type is called recognition-primed decision-making.
Recognition-primed decision-making.
Yeah, and this is where, experts can develop a remarkable ability to make quick, accurate judgments based on their vast experience.
So like a firefighter who can just like instantly size up a situation and know exactly what to do.
Exactly, or a doctor who can, diagnose a complex illness with just a few clues.
Yeah.
In these cases, the expert's intuition is built on years of accumulated knowledge and pattern recognition. They've encountered so many similar situations that they can almost effortlessly recognize the key features and make a judgment based on that deep understanding.
Right. They've seen it all before.
They've seen it all before, exactly.
Okay, so that makes sense. But what about situations where there's, no clear pattern or precedent to draw on?
Right. That's the second type of situation.
Okay.
And that's where things get a lot trickier.
Okay.
In these cases, our intuition is often unreliable, even if we're experts.
So if I'm like a financial expert trying to predict the stock market,
right,
my intuition probably isn't going to be that helpful.
Unfortunately, that's often the case in these complex and unpredictable domains. Our minds tend to see patterns where none exist, and we often overestimate our ability to predict the future.
Right. So how can we tell the difference between, true expert intuition and just plain wishful thinking?
Well, Kahneman says to look for environments that are predictable and where the expert has had a lot of experience through practice.
Okay, so environments like chess or firefighting.
Right.
Where there are, clear rules and patterns that can be mastered over time.
Exactly. But even in those areas, you shouldn't blindly trust expert intuition.
Oh,
It's important to test their intuitions against objective data.
Right.
And of course, be willing to change your judgment if the evidence says you're wrong.
Right. Even the best experts can be wrong.
Absolutely.
Which leads to another question. If intuition can be so unreliable,
Hmm.
What should we base our decisions on?
Well, that's where the power of algorithms comes in.
Algorithms. You're
Yeah.
telling me a computer program can make better decisions than an experienced professional?
It might sound counterintuitive, but there's a lot of research to back this up.
Hmm.
Algorithms are simply more accurate,
Oh,
like
wow.
when it comes to making predictions and decisions.
Wow. Okay, so what's the secret behind these algorithms?
Well, they consistently apply a set of rules without being influenced by emotions or biases.
Hmm.
Um, they they consider many factors
Okay.
and they weigh them appropriately based on past data.
So instead of going with their gut feeling,
Right.
they're looking at the facts.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And this can be incredibly valuable when the stakes are high
Right.
and the consequences of a wrong decision are significant.
Hmm. I can see where that would be useful.
Yeah.
But aren't there some things that can't be reduced to a set of rules or a statistical formula?
That's a valid concern. Algorithms aren't a cure-all.
Okay.
There are certainly situations where human judgment and intuition are still essential.
When it comes to things like creativity or innovation.
Exactly, yeah, where there's no clear path to success. Algorithms are great at identifying patterns,
Okay.
but they're not so great at coming up with brand new ideas.
Right, right. So we need, kind of a balance between the analytical power of algorithms
Mm,
and the creative spark of human intuition.
I think that's a great way to put it. Yeah, it's not about picking one over the other. It's
Okay.
about finding the right combination for each situation.
Hmm. I'm curious to know more about how we can find that right balance.
Yeah, well, we'll dive into that a bit more in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Okay, so let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Sounds good. So, how do we know when to trust an algorithm and when to rely on our own judgment or the judgment of an expert?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it seems like, algorithms are really good at some things,
Yeah,
but maybe not so good at others.
right.
So how do we know when to use which tool?
Well, Kahneman suggests a few things.
Okay.
First, be aware of the limitations of both human judgment and algorithms.
Okay, so we shouldn't just blindly follow an algorithm's recommendations.
Exactly. Even the best algorithms are based on past data.
Right.
They can't predict the future perfectly,
Mhm.
so you should always use your own judgment to evaluate the output of any algorithm.
Especially when it's like a really important decision.
Exactly.
That makes sense. What else should we keep in mind?
Think about the decision you're making. If it's a really complex situation with lots of variables,
Yeah.
an algorithm is probably going to be more accurate than a human.
So things like credit scoring or medical diagnoses.
Exactly. An algorithm can help reduce bias and make things more consistent.
Mm.
But if the decision involves more subjective judgments or requires creativity,
Right.
human intuition is probably going to be more valuable.
So it's all about choosing the right tool for the job.
Exactly.
Okay. But even when we're using algorithms, humans are still involved.
Yeah,
Sorry.
absolutely. We set the parameters, interpret the results, and make the final decision.
Mm.
Kahneman's work really highlights how important it is to understand how algorithms work and how they can help us make better decisions.
That's reassuring. I was starting to worry that machines were going to take over the world.
I don't think we're there yet.
Okay, good.
But this deep dive is all about helping you become more informed and make smarter decisions, both in your personal and professional life.
Right. The more we understand about how our minds work, the better choices we can make.
Exactly.
Okay, so before we wrap up, let's do a quick recap.
Okay.
We've explored the idea of expert intuition and how it can be both accurate and unreliable.
Right.
We've also discussed algorithms and how they can be powerful tools for decision-making.
Mm,
But it's important to use them wisely
right.
and to remember that human judgment is still an essential part of the process.
Absolutely.
We've also talked about how important it is to be aware of our own biases and to use strategies like slowing down, reframing the problem, and seeking outside views.
Those are all great strategies.
Yeah, so you've been given a lot of information.
A lot to think about.
Think of this as a toolkit for making better decisions.
Absolutely.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but there's so much more to explore in Thinking Fast and Slow.
It really is a fascinating book.
Yeah, if you want to learn more about how your mind works and how to make smarter decisions, I highly recommend checking it out.
I second that.
And I think one thing that really stuck with me from the book is the idea of, loss aversion.
Oh, yeah, that's a powerful one.
Yeah, the idea that, we feel the pain of a loss, more intensely than the pleasure of an equal gain.
It's true. We really hate to lose.
Yeah, yeah, and it can, make us make some pretty rational decisions.
It can, yeah.
Like holding on to a stock that's tanking
Right.
just because we don't want to admit that we made a mistake.
Or staying in a bad relationship
Oh, yeah,
longer than we should.
just because we're afraid of being alone.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much our decisions are driven by this fear of loss.
It is so knowing about loss aversion,
Mm.
how can we use that knowledge to our advantage?
Well, I think one thing we can do is to try to reframe our thinking.
Okay.
So instead of focusing on what we stand to lose,
Yeah.
we can focus on what we stand to gain.
Okay.
So for example, if you're thinking about investing in a new venture,
Right.
instead of dwelling on the possibility of losing money,
Yeah.
you can focus on the potential for growth and profit.
Okay. So it's like looking at the glass half full instead of half empty.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a simple shift in perspective, but it can make a big difference.
That's a good point. And I think it also ties into what we were talking about earlier with, slowing down and thinking things through.
Absolutely.
Because if we're, rushing into a decision based on fear,
Right.
we're more likely to make a mistake.
We are. Yeah. We need to give ourselves time to really weigh the options and consider all the angles.
Right, right. And maybe even, get some outside input.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes it helps to talk to someone who is not emotionally invested in the situation.
Good advice. Well, I think this has been a really fascinating deep dive into, the world of thinking fast and slow.
It really is a fascinating book.
Yeah, it's one of those books that I think everyone should read.
I agree.
It just gives you so much insight into how your mind works.
And how to make better decisions.
Exactly. Exactly. And so I want to thank you for, taking the time to share your insights with us today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
And I want to encourage everyone listening to, check out the book for themselves.
Absolutely. It's well worth the read.
And until next time, keep thinking, both fast and slow.
And keep diving deep.
We'll see you next time.